That's it. Good afternoon, everyone. From Dr. Stevens, we have Elaine, and we also have Dr. Philip Crowley, the National Director for Quality Improvement Division, with us here. Welcome to our WebEx today on QI coaching conversations. So without further ado, Philip is going to open it up here with Elaine for us.
Great, you're all very welcome. And Elaine, thank you very much for doing the WebEx today. Yeah. And Roisin, as always, for organising it so expertly. Elaine has been working with us for quite some time in the division. She's a lecturer on the BSc and postgraduate general nursing programs, program lead on the leadership masterclasses for nurses and midwives. She's doing a lot of work with us on the framework for improving quality and how we implement that around the system. But today really is all about coaching, and it draws on a lot of Elaine's other skills that she brings to bear in the job. And I think coaching is a really important topic. In the end of the day, I think nationally we need to develop much greater skill base in coaching so as we can support frontline staff to get on with doing their job as best they can. I think coaching is a key skill that I think we don't probably have enough of in our system, and one that I look forward to hearing more about today. So I'd like to hand you over to Elaine.
Okay, thank you, Philip.
And just a few quick instructions. The top right-hand corner is the chat box. As always, we'd like to hear any of your questions or comments throughout the WebEx, and we'll deal with those at the end. Elaine will have time to answer any of your questions for you. Your phone number there is on the slide. It's also typed into the chat box with the event number, which is the access code. Keep the questions coming, and as always, we're very active on Twitter. If anyone would like to tweet their group and tag at QITalktime, that'd be brilliant. So without further ado, thanks, Elaine.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip, for that introduction, and thanks to Roisin as well. So today in this webinar, it's approximately 45 minutes of a presentation, but I really want to try and give a little bit of an opportunity for some questions afterwards. So what I'm trying to get across in this short presentation today is really to give you an overview of what coaching is, generally what coaching is, and how you would go about engaging in a coaching conversation. It is about being able to provide you with the understanding of the basic coaching principles, the basic tools and techniques that you can use when you're in that position of leading coaching conversations. And then if anything, I would really like you to take away 3 core things from this webinar today, and I'm going to be sharing those with you throughout the presentation. The benefits of coaching then. So why should we think about engaging in coaching and in coaching style conversations? Well, it is always an opportunity to work with people who are very motivated to grow and change. Now in the slides you'll see usually is in brackets there, and that's because in the past what happened was some employers in organisations believed that they would have to send their employees on coaching courses. So sometimes the motivation for the individual wasn't always there, but by and large now, the way we understand coaching is that it is absolutely about working with someone who has already decided that it's important to them to grow and to change. It's an opportunity to make a difference, particularly for the client that you're actually having the coaching conversation with, the coaching relationship with, but it's also an opportunity to make a difference with you yourself, because the more coaching that you do, the better you get at it. There's a huge potential in job satisfaction, and again, this is from both angles, both for the coach, but also, more importantly, for the client, because it's about being able to unlock the potential that that client has inside them, and when they get it, when they have that light bulb moment and they actually get what it is all about, it does actually help them to feel very, very good about themselves and about their role. It enables augmentation of your normal management style. So most managers, most leaders will have 1, 2, possibly 3 styles that they particularly favour when managing teams of people, when leading teams. But the coaching style of management will actually enhance what you already do. So there's a great benefit there. And then I particularly like this one. It's a special opportunity to walk with someone when they're going through an issue, or a difficulty, when that person is sharing their story with you as a coach, when they're sharing that situation, sometimes some of the stories can be quite harrowing to hear. So it's a very enriching experience when you start on that journey with that client, with that person, and you encourage them to actually see that situation with a different eye. So the coaching definition then that we like here is from the International Coach Federation, of which Ireland is an affiliated member. And they say that they believe coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximise their personal and professional potential. And then they just add this little bit in, which is particularly important in today's uncertain and complex environment. And I just thought really that could cover anything, because globally we're living in a very uncertain environment, but particularly here in Ireland, from a national perspective, we have the Health Service Executive with all of the new structures that are being implemented. So for us, working in healthcare, it is uncertain, and we are part of a very complex organisation. That's quite poignant there. So what is coaching then? Well, we talk about coaching as incorporating an appreciative approach. And what we mean by that is an appreciative approach is really about discovery-based inquiry. So it's always about trying to construct your observations and your feedback in the most positive way to have the most positive impact on the person that you're with. And we do look at the problems, we do look at the client story, but it's very much about looking at solutions and using the problems as tools for learning. It will always begin with a personal interview, and this is because as a coach, you need to find out a little bit about the person that you're going to be working with, that you're going to be on that journey with. You also need to find out what it is they want from the coaching relationship. Why have they decided to look for coaching? And between sessions, as a coach, you do ask the client to complete specific agreed actions. And this is really about keeping the whole momentum of that coaching relationship going between each of the sessions. And as a coach, it's commonplace that you would provide some of the additional resources that clients would need to help them on this journey. So the International Coach Federation Ireland has 11 core competencies around coaching, and to make us have an ease of remembrance of them, because there's quite a few, they've developed them into 4 main clusters. So your first cluster is setting the foundation, and basically that's really about meeting the professional guidelines and ethical standards around coaching. So there's an expectation that you as a coach do have an understanding about what's expected of you from the professional point of view in the coaching industry. It's also about establishing the coaching agreement. So it's this idea of having an interview with the client and sitting down with them and actually trying to ascertain what it is that they want on this journey of coaching. The second group is co-creating the relationship, and there are 2 competencies in this group as well. So this is very much about establishing trust and intimacy with your client. The client has to feel that they have a psychologically safe space to be able to share what it is they need to share. And as I've already said, sometimes the situations or the stories that clients share with you can be very harrowing. Some of them are quite distressing. So it is about being able to have that space where they feel they can really open up and connect with you. Also in this little group is the coaching presence. So it's very much about how you as a coach behave, your own body language, your own non-verbal cues, and you need to be very aware of how you're coming across. The third cluster or group here is communicating effectively. So in this group we have 3 competencies, and we talk about active or intuitive listening. And that's really listening at levels 4 and 5, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail later on. But it is about really listening to what's being said as well as what's not being said. In this particular grouping, we also have the powerful questions. And again, I'm going to talk about these a little bit more, but these are the questions that really open up the client's thinking about their situation, about their story. And then the final group is facilitating learning and results. And there are 4 competencies in this actual bracket. Obviously, we have creating awareness. So as a coach, you need to be aware that there's lots of different information coming in as you're sitting and talking with your client. It's their body language, it's their non-verbal cues, but it's also the situation themselves that they've been in and that they're sharing with you. You also have to be aware in terms of planning and goal setting. So how is it that you're going to work with this client? Is it a case of setting goals first, or do you need to put a little bit of time aside to actually build the relationship? And then when you think about the goal setting, you know, I think most of us are familiar with this idea of SMART. So the goals have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be achievable, they have to be realistic, and they have to be time-bound. And then finally, in this little grouping here, it is absolutely about managing progress and accountability. So it's the coach's ability to hold the client accountable for what they need to do. We said before that coaching really is about facilitating the client or the coachee to actually get the answers themselves. So as a coach, you need to be aware of that. Some work that's being done internationally, which I'm particularly interested in, is the work by Judith Glaser. And she talks about conversational intelligence for coaches. And in this work that she's doing, she talks about using discovery-type questions and innovation-type questions. So when you're asking discovery questions, you're really getting the client to drill down into what their assumptions are of their situation or their story. And again, with the situation questions, you're asking things like, what has happened already? What would you like to see happen in the future? And then the sharing and exploring questions are really about getting the client to share with you how they felt in a particular scenario or as part of that story was playing out. The innovation questions, we talk about insight building, the possibilities, the perspectives. The questions, you know, in this range would be things like, in an ideal world, if you could do absolutely anything to address this situation, what would you like to do? And perspectives, getting the client to look at their situation or their story from a different perspective, from a different eye, in a different way. The same with the thought-provoking and the idea development. It's very much about asking them, what do you think you could change about this situation, or what is it about this story that has intrigued you? And the other bit of work that Judith Glaser is involved in, she calls it the 5 neuro tips for effective coaching conversations. And the first one is co-creating conversations changes neurochemistry. Basically what she means here is when we co-create the conversations as a coach with our client, we actually change the mindset. And we know that it's the prefrontal cortex in the brain that is responsible for the feelings of empathy, or as some people like to say, sympathetic presence. We know that it's the prefrontal cortex that talks about really looking at a situation as a big strategic picture, but at the same time being able to drill down into that and look at those internal triggers for us as individuals. So Glaser's work in co-creating conversations is how you go about doing this to change the mindset of the client that you're with. Elevate partnering at moment of contact. So really this is about listening to connect. This is what Glaser means when she talks about elevating partnering at the moment of contact, listening to connect. And an example that she gives here is the actual mindset that we are in right before we do something will absolutely influence the outcome. And she gives the example of students waiting to go in to do their exam, their state exam. And if they are in a very heightened, anxious state and they believe that they're not going to remember everything and they're not going to be able to answer the question, then unfortunately that's what normally happens. So she talks about being able to listen to connect and really elevate that partnering relationship from the very first time that you meet with the client. And just being cognizant of that each time as you have your coaching conversations. I really like this one, the gut instinct rules. And what she means here is that we now know from a lot of the international evidence that the digestive system, the gut, is intrinsically linked to both the brain as well as the heart. And the brain is what governs our mindsets, and the heart, we're now starting to realise, actually is the seat of our emotions as well. So when these three are all intrinsically connected, if we are in the space where we are listening to our gut instinct, where we're listening to that little inner voice, where we have that sixth sense about a conversation, that is actually going to benefit us as a coach, but it will also benefit our clients. So thinking about the idea of having a really good conversation, even if that conversation is at times difficult, but if the outcome of the conversation is good, it actually makes us good. We walk away feeling good about that, and it actually helps to elevate our trust for dealing with that person again. Avoid addiction to being right. And this is probably one of the most important things in the difference between coaching and mentoring. Because as a coach, it's not about you giving your advice or your opinion, and it's certainly not about you jumping in and saying, well, actually, what you did there was wrong, you need to now do this. When we're in this idea of, we're right in what we say and what we think, we are in an I-centric mode. And we want to move more into the we-centric mode when we're in coaching. So avoiding the addiction to being right, it is about listening without the judgment hat on, and it's about listening to connect. So you're always thinking, as you're listening to that conversation, as you're listening to that client, share their story with you, share their situation. What is it that's the best thing that I can say or do here for this client? And then finally in her work, she talks about overcoming uncertainty, and I think each and every one of us has felt this at some point. When we're in an uncertain mode, we watch, we wait and see, and to some degree that's not a bad thing, but if we stay in the uncertain mode, then we're not actually going to be able to engage fully with other people. And in the coaching relationship, it is about being fully engaged with them. So we need to think about how we're going to overcome those uncertain periods in the conversation. And a question that you can ask to really start building up this idea of being really sure about your client and about their situation, what opportunities exist here to create a state of trust between us? So you can ask those kind of questions there. The quality questions, the International Coach Federation says that quality questions are always very simple. They always have a clear sense of purpose. They're about influencing and not controlling. So this is the idea again. It's not about you as a coach jumping in and saying what you think they should do, but it is about being able to influence the client to the best solution for them. And obviously you get to know your client over a period of time, and the better you know them, the better you'll be able to actually do that. Quality questions will always focus not on the problem, they will focus on the solution. And they always generate movement, and we talk about generating movement psychologically. So it's actually enabling the person to move forward in their thinking. I've talked about this before, but it's developing that third eye, looking at things from a different perspective. And then the incisive questions are similar. Well-timed, perfectly worded questions have the ability to give a person that light bulb moment. So we talk about either turning the key or unlocking the door, but it's about provoking that real insight into their situation or into their story. And some of the questions that we can ask there are, what is important for you here to do first? What do you think you should do first here? Or if you could change this situation, if you could go back, what would you like to do? So along with the different types of questioning that we've just gone through, the discovery, the innovation, the quality, the incisive questions, we also have to be very aware of our listening skills. And I just like this little slide here, listen and silence are spelled with the same letters, and we do need to think about that. But the first level of listening is waiting to speak. And I always think this is probably In some cases, it's deemed to be the most irritating because it's where people will interrupt you, and it's very much about they're listening to what you're saying to a degree, but they are very much focused on what they want to say. So it is really about them jumping in. Listening at level 2, the person is interested in the subject that you're talking about, but again, they are very much waiting to jump in and give their own experience. So they're not really listening or focusing on what it is that you're sharing with them. Listening at level 3, giving advice. As coaches, we do this very sparingly and with caution. But in this particular instance, listening at level 3 and jumping in and giving advice is really about giving advice without exploring, is this going to benefit this client or this coachee or this person? Is it actually going to help them in their own thinking? Listening at level 4, so now in coaching we start to listen at levels 4 and 5. So listening at level 4 is really listening and focusing on what the person is telling you, so you're really concentrating on their story. But they have the luxury of you asking them, can you tell me a little bit more about that? That's interesting. Can you just enlarge on that, please? And then listening at level 5 is where really good, really effective coaching and coaching conversations happen, because the intuitive or active listening is where you are very focused on what the person is saying. You're listening to what they're telling you, but you're also listening to what they're not saying. So it's about going down underneath the layers, actually drilling down into what it is they're actually not sharing with you in words, but it may be body language tips or non-verbal cues that you're picking up. And the intuitive active listening really does enable you as a coach to try and have an understanding of that client's own integrity, their own value base, where it is that they're coming from. And that's very important when you're trying to have an effective coaching conversation. So the coaching behaviours then, one coaching behaviour is just to say nothing. And this is quite a powerful tool to use when you're in the middle of a conversation. Bringing in silence actually changes the pace of the conversation. It also allows the person who is talking, the client, to have a little bit of a breather in their own thinking. So it's this idea of reflection in action. It gives them time to pause. It gives them time to think about what they've just said. Asking open, neutrally worded questions, which we've just sort of gone through. But these are the questions that the client just can't say yes or no to. So it is about being able to drill down and find out what the client's perspective is of their situation, of their story. Summarising what you've been hearing, and this is a behaviour that you hone as you go through your own coaching journey, but it is about being able to paraphrase, reiterate, summarise what the client has just shared with you, and you do it in a way that enables them to hear what they've just said in your words, but also it enables them to reach conclusions that they may not have come to on their own. So being able to summarise what they've said is a very powerful tool. And then making an observation. And really making an observation is about what you see and hear happening in real time while the person is actually sharing their story or their situation with you. And it's very good to use if someone contradicts themselves in the same sentence, which happens a lot. So as a coach, you can actually wait until they're finished, and then you can say something like, you started that sentence by, and you can say what they said to you. And then you can say, however, now you seem to be looking at this from a different perspective, and now you're saying this. And again, when you share your observation as a coach with your client, with the person being coached, that's also a very powerful tool for giving them a different perspective. Giving advice and opinions, I've already said, in coaching, this is something that we don't do, or if we absolutely feel we have to, we do it very carefully, and we do it really with a lot of caution. Giving instruction. Sometimes in coaching, the situation does warrant you're giving a specific instruction to enable the person that you're having the conversation with or having the coaching relationship with to be more self-directed. And I'm just thinking of an example, probably September of last year, 2017, I was having a coaching conversation with a very small team of people in one of our healthcare organisations. And we were talking about the whole idea of quality improvement and measurement and looking at key performance indicators. And they actually said to me, Elaine, what would your advice be here? What would you tell us is the best thing to do? So as a coach, what I tried to share with them was what we've seen other organisations do in relation to how they measure specific key performance indicators and then how they display that information. But it was still very much about, this is what these organisations have done, this is what this particular organisation did slightly differently, this is the learning that you can get from looking at those examples, and you still leave it with them as to what it is they think they should do. So this little Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man a fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The teaching the man to fish and feeding him for a lifetime is what coaching is. So you can give instruction, but it's very much about enabling them to come up with the solutions, enabling them to come up with the answers. And just while we were talking about coaching behaviours, I just thought it was a good idea to bring in this matrix, particularly where we want to try and focus, which is the top right-hand side, the high support, high challenge, and we call that the learning zone. And obviously, you know, as a coach, when you're doing the high challenge piece, it is about stretching your client, it is about stretching that conversation and challenging them to think about things in a different way. But the high support piece is where they feel psychologically safe, you know, to have you challenge them. They feel safe that you're doing that. And I suppose just a word of caution here as well, to remember that realistically, in all of our work environments, we cannot be in the high support, high challenge 24/7, 100% of the time. It's just impossible. So there are times that we do jump in and out of the other three. But what we're trying to do in a coaching conversation, in a coaching relationship, is really building this high support, high challenge. And then again, you know, I just wanted to bring this slide in here, the Johari window. And it's very much focusing on that top right-hand square there. Each of us, as human beings, each of us have a blind spot. So it's something that we are not aware of ourselves, whether it's something that we do, whether it's something about the way we speak, but other people are very aware of it. And in coaching, you just need to remember that you will have a blind spot that the person that you're having a conversation with may very well pick up on. And depending on how much trust and intimacy you're able to establish with your client will actually depend on how much they can share with you in relation to your blind spot. But particularly as a coach, it's about getting clients to understand what their blind spot is and to see about how they can make changes. So this is what I really want you to take away from this webinar today. These are the three core things that I want you to try and remember. The three core coaching skills. We talk about listening like a coach. So listen at levels 4 and levels 5. Listen actively, listen intuitively, listen to what they're sharing with you, listen to what's being said, but also listen to what's not being said in that moment, what's really underneath the layers here. Try and understand what their value base is and their own integrity, where it is that they're coming from. Think like a coach. So again, when you're having a conversation with somebody in the coaching style, you are always, as a coach, thinking, what's the best thing I can do here for this person? Is it a particular type of question? Is it a particular type of behaviour? Is it just saying nothing? What is it that I can do that's going to have the best, most positive impact for this person that I'm with? And then finally, speak like a coach. And this is really about remembering, as I've said earlier, sometimes when people come to you for a coaching, they will share quite distressing experiences that they've gone through. And in the transactional analysis, we know that people can jump in and out of parent mode and child mode. Depending on the situation and how it's affecting them, they may be in this child-type mode, but as a coach, you always speak to them as if they're fully functioning adults. Very important to remember that. And then there's a lot of models that we have for coaching. I've just put two up here as general examples, the GROW model and the CLEAR model. They've both been around since the 1980s. The GROW model is very much about setting your goals. So it's that idea of your goals being SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. The reality, what is the situation now? What's happened previously? The options, what is it that you think you would like to do to change this situation? And then the will. How are you going to do this? And how are you going to know that you've been successful? And then the CLEAR model, again, is very similar. The CLEAR model, you have a contract. So you both engage in a coaching plan. And again, it's about setting some goals, listening, and hopefully as a coach you're going to be listening at level 4 and level 5. The action, what actions are you going to work with the client to actually try and implement, and then the review stage. So in quality improvement we like this because we feel it closes the loop, but it's reviewing, did this work, did this actual coaching style of model work for us? If it did, great. If it didn't, why is that? You may have to go back to the drawing board. But I just wanted to share with you as well some of the new work around coaching, some of the international evidence. And there's a guy out there called David Drake, and he talks about a significant factor in coaching is how we relate to our clients. So it's similar to the International Coach Federation. He talks about preparing your client for coaching, so that's setting the foundation, ensuring that they're aware of what's expected of them and what you as a coach can offer. Creating a space for change, so this is about being able to have that psychological safe space, building in trust and intimacy. Welcoming the whole story, and this is very important. In Drake's work, he's all about the story, and sometimes it is really about having 2, 3, and in my case, with one particular client, it was 4 sessions before we could actually even think about setting goals. So it's about welcoming that whole story, engaging with what arises, and sometimes it is about having to think on your feet and you're working in real time with this person as they're sharing with you what's happened. Inviting the new story then, okay, so this is what's happened, what would we like in terms of the future, how would we like to deal with this if this came up again, and then helping the client to bring it to life. So David Drake's work is about narrative coaching, and it's very much about using the client's own narrative, their own story, as the source, the catalyst for change. And he's quite adamant here in his work because he said it's not about coaching methodology, it's not about coaching methods, and he's moving away from using specific models. So this is an interesting scenario in Drake's work. He talks about working in the moment and authentically, so it's what I've just said about being in real time with that client, with that person as they're sharing their story or their situation with you, and being authentic in your own presence. So listening actively, listening intuitively, and always thinking like a coach. Remembering that change is only possible in the present. So things that have happened, situations and stories that we are sharing with a coach are all in the past, and the work that we do in the coaching relationship is actually based in the future. It's how are we going to make this different, how are we going to change the perspective, but the actual change itself can only happen in the present, and that's why coaching is so important, because it's that powerful. It's about having those light bulb moments in real time as you're having those conversations. And Drake talks about focusing on clarity. So it's the clearness of the thinking around the situation. Not so much about being right. So it's not about certainty, but it's how clear are you on what happened. And then this idea of moving towards the unknown rather than the known. And that's where he's bringing in this idea of what it is that you need to do in the future to actually make this situation different. So in narrative coaching, people tell their story first. And I've just shared with you that there was a particular client, we had 3 sessions before that client actually felt that they could even think about setting goals. So it's important to remember that your client or the person you're coaching won't necessarily know their goals at the very beginning in your first session. Remember that the client's story always has the answer. And this is the powerful bit in coaching, that it's not about you as the coach and what you think, it is about what's happened to the client. And it's getting them to realise that they do have that power, that their story actually has the resolution for them. And we can ask questions in this space, such as how aware are you of what's happening now? What core issue do you think needs to change here? And Drake also talks about the emotional triggers. So we have those 6 emotions depicted there that each of us go through, you know, at different times, different days. But he talks about this sense of when we think about a situation or a story, it's very much our sense of being triggered by the thinking of that situation, not so much the situation itself. And in coaching, we pay attention to the trigger, not the behaviour. And remembering that the aim in coaching, it's not about helping people to get rid of those triggers. We don't want them to forget their situation or their story, but we do want them to be able to understand those triggers, so it's about befriending them, looking at their own identity as a person and releasing their own understanding about that situation. So I just wanted to share this with you. We talk about changing culture, and we say that depending on how complex the organisation is, culture change can take 3, 5, 7, maybe 10 years. And it's the same with coaching, because change takes time, but it's actually made one moment at a time. So it's that light bulb moment, it's that split second when you're having that conversation with somebody and they actually really get it. And finally, I just wanted to share this with you, that there are 2 rules of thumb in coaching. The first rule of thumb is that as a coach, you have to really believe, you have to have that fundamental belief that the person that you're with, the client, can achieve what they believe they can achieve. And then the second rule of thumb is you continue raising that belief. So I'm going to finish there for now. I suppose in summary, we've talked about the International Coach Federation and those 11 core competencies. We've talked about the types of questions that you can use. We've talked about listening at levels 4 and 5. And we've talked about some of the different coaching behaviours. We've touched on a couple of models there, but there's also this new evidence now internationally from Glaser and from Drake. We talk about conversation intelligence for coaches and Drake's work around narrative coaching. And just to remember those 3 core things that I want you to take away from this session. Listen like a coach, listen at level 4 and 5, listen to what's being said as well as what's not being said. Think like a coach. What's the best thing that I can give this client in the here and now? What question should I ask? What behaviour should I exhibit? And then speak like a coach. Remember to always speak to your client, to the person that you're with, as if they are a fully functioning adult, no matter what it is they're sharing with you. So thank you.
Great. Thanks a million, Elaine. If anyone has any questions or comments that they want to put into the chat box, now is your time. Philip, did you want to make any comments? We have 1 or 2 questions here in the chat box as well.
Yeah, I'm keen that we address the questions that people are raising. Just, I suppose, from my perspective, like, is it hard to skill up to become a coach? I mean, you know, if we would like to promote that there be more coaching to support staff in different situations, is it very onerous to kind of develop these skills?
I wouldn't say it's onerous, Philip, but the person has to probably have an interest in the subject to begin with. So you have to feel that it's something that you really want to do. not everybody is in that coaching space. Some people prefer to be more in the mentoring space, and we can talk about the differences between coaching and mentoring later on. But if you really do feel that you want to do coaching, and if you want to be able to engage in coaching conversations, particularly when we're thinking about how we want to try and improve things, I mean, there's a whole industry out there built up around coaching, but I know the HSE also has a program for actually allowing people to engage in 2- and 3-day courses around coaching. So it's not that it's hard, but I think you have to have that motivation yourself inside that it's something you really want to do.
I imagine it's something we all think we do a bit of anyway, and probably quite poorly, probably. Speaking personally, maybe. So I just, what are the kind of big pitfalls for people who kind of are somewhat, maybe not so well prepared and are involved effectively in the coaching? Kind of might not be a formal coaching relationship, but in effect, it's a kind of a coaching-coachee relationship. But what are the kind of pitfalls that people can?
Okay, I think one of the most important things is to really avoid jumping in. So allow the person to say what they want to say and allow them the time to finish. And that way you are really starting to think about your own self and listening at level 4, listening at level 5. So listening at level 4 is where you think about yourself in that space with the person, and you can just say to them, that's really interesting what you've said. Can you just share a little bit more? Can you tell me some more about that? Because if you just jump in, which is what a lot of people tend to do, that would be considered a pitfall. It would. Yeah. And then the other pitfall is jumping in to give advice. And very often, if you can imagine, there was a patient advisor who was sharing a very harrowing story with me last year, and it was to do with her journey around childbirth. And I'm a nurse and midwife by background, so as she was sharing the story with me, I was so tempted to jump in and say, oh, but they can't do that and you should have done this. So I really had to pull myself back and be in the coaching mode, not in the midwife mode, but be in the coaching mode and really just have this idea it's not about my advice, it's not about my opinion, it's about helping that person to find the solution for them. And just to say there was a really happy outcome because that patient advisor did go on to have her 3rd child and everything went really well, and she felt very confident going into the maternity unit because we've done some coaching around upskilling her to have those challenging conversations.
Roisin here, just flicking over to the chat box, quite a bit of activity here. So a number of people asking for access to other maybe, web addresses or evidence, and perhaps, Elaine, when we're uploading your talk in the slides that we could put in at the end some references and links to people.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to do that.
Yeah, and also how they would get in touch with the HSE program, so we can do that in the bottom of the slides.
Yeah.
So just from Eleanor Riviore, who's joining us from Canada. Hi, Eleanor, and she's asking about thoughts about how to help the coachee to be receptive to coaching, thoughts on transparency of coaching.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor, for that. And that question actually touches on what I said at the very beginning, because previously some employers in organisations just think there's a problem here, I'm going to send this particular person on a coaching programme. And that person may not feel ready to actually be involved in a coaching program or even feel ready to have a coaching conversation with somebody that they don't know. So that's the space that we've been in. And what we're trying to do now is we're trying to actually make coaching per se a lot more open. So we're trying to put a lot more of the information about coaching and the benefits of coaching out there so that people do have a way of accessing the information about coaching before they actually engage in that coaching relationship. And they start to see and they start to believe that this is actually something that's going to help them. It's going to help them with their story, with their situation, and it's actually going to help them on their own journey through life. So thanks, Eleanor, for that.
Another question which has come up a few times in similar ways is really around using coaching techniques in maybe more informal situations in work. So Ciara Kirk and Ruth Creighton have asked around this, saying that it strikes them that these techniques are applicable in many settings in a less formal way, for example, one-to-ones with line managers, any discussions with co-workers. So just really, like, any thoughts on that, Elaine, about how we can employ better listening and coaching skills in lots of interactions?
Yeah, and that's excellent, and thank you for sharing that, Ciara and Ruth. That's a really good point, because, you know, we know that there's a whole industry built up around coaching, but we're not saying that you have to have a certificate to be able to do it well. It's very much about you as an individual and how you relate to the person that you're talking to. So all of those points that we've just gone through in that presentation, all of those types of questions, listening at level 4 and 5, and all of those types of coaching behaviours are the kind of things that you can implement yourself and even practice, you know, practice with a colleague actually doing this and get your colleague to then give you feedback on how you've done in having this coaching conversation.
Great. Another one from Eleanor, she's asking about, which is a great question, about how might we involve patients and families who are partners in design be viewed as having a coaching role or for the care or service provider. The definition leans towards coaching role responsibility resting only with the healthcare providers, perhaps more at an organisational or system level of design.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Eleanor, for that. And myself and Eleanor have worked together in one of our organisations here in Ireland around the whole patient and family engagement. So it's been a great journey. But part of that journey has been working very closely with patient advisors. So these are people who have actually gone through a patient journey in that particular healthcare organisation. And we have then invited them to come in and sit on our different committees. And we encourage them to open up about their own journey, but also to give us the perspective from the patient's point of view. And Eleanor's work is very much about that, and it's so important, and it's very, very powerful. And for myself, when I was actually working in a different hospital within a healthcare organisation, and actually got to work directly with these patient advisors, for me, myself as a coach, that was something very powerful, because I was able to see firsthand how a story from a patient about something very harrowing or very distressing that's happened to them, how you can turn around that story and how you can find the solution within that story. And when you're in the space with that person, and in this case it was the patient advisor, the power that they felt, you know, they said they felt very empowered and much more confident then to actually go into a committee meeting and say, well, look, you know, from my perspective, this is what happened, this is how I was treated as a patient, this is how my family were treated. And they're confident to talk about that, because without the coaching, sometimes patient advisors, although they can have all the training, sometimes it is also about being able to coach them in real time around their particular situation. So that's very important. And I think, Eleanor, you're right, we do need to think, how are we going to build this into our systems? How are we going to build this into our training programs?
Great. Just one last question, Elaine, just from your own depth of experience as a coach, is there anything profound, like is there one profound thing you've learned over the years with your experience in coaching?
Yeah, and it's similar to what I've just said, and I've been coaching now for about 5 years, but trying to sort of move on myself in my own journey during that time. But it was when I was actually talking to somebody who had been through a very difficult experience in the HSE with their own patient journey. And it was actually talking with them and listening to that story and then going on the coaching journey with them. And we actually had a coaching session every month for 7 months. And it was at the very end of that coaching journey that patient advisor, that person actually said, I feel really confident now, and when I go in to have my third baby, this is exactly what I'm going to be saying to them. So for me, it was very powerful to think I've been part of that story and helped that person to come to this solution themselves. That was very powerful.
And maybe just to add to that, I mean, one of the things that I suppose, when you think about what are we achieving, you know, we're all trying to make the health services better. Mm. One of the big things I think we should all strive to achieve is to enhance the work experience of people who are working with us and maybe for us, so that they, you know, are developed in their role and they can go on and, you know, in other parts of their working lives, bring what they've learned from working with us. I think coaching is a key additional kind of tool to bring to bear in that kind of space. And I think just through coaching we can hopefully help people find their way a bit better and be more effective and therefore happier, probably.
Yeah, I would agree, Philip. And you know, there's also a program at the moment around mentoring, and some people may feel more comfortable in the mentoring space because mentoring is about being able to give the advice, and it is about being able to say, look, this is what you need to do when you're in that situation again. But the special thing about coaching is that you're on that journey with that person at whatever stage they choose to share with you. But it's very much about giving them the skills. It's actually building in them their resilience to be able to take this and move forward. And I think that's the powerful thing about coaching.
Great, thanks Elaine. I think that's a great way to end, and we have lots of positive comments coming in there from Rose McCall, who's saying this is food for thought, and QITalktime provides tools for working and living, which is great. Thanks, Rose. And Veronica Hanlon, actually, thanks Veronica, has alerted us to a 2-day coaching skills for managers program available through the Leadership, Education and Talent Development departments around the country, and it's delivered by ICF accredited coaches. So we can put some maybe information with respect to that up there, and there's Elaine's email address. I'm sure you'd be happy to take some queries, Elaine. So just thank you very much, Elaine, for a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
This will be available up online on the QITalktime page. Also, we have some helpful links there for qualityimprovement.ie, where you'll find everything that the Quality Improvement Division is working on up there. And we also have a knowledge and skills guide, which is great if you're thinking about looking at your quality improvement knowledge and skills within your staff. And then lastly, our next QITalktime is on the Tuesday, April 10th at 1 p.m. It's with Jean-Paul Peeling, who is professor in UCD from the Lean Academy, and he's doing some really interesting research on the link between person-centeredness and lean. And the one after that is actually going to be from NRH on introducing a daily operational safety huddle and their experience of that. So we hope you can join in then. So without further ado, thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.